Okay.
So, greetings and hello, everyone. This is another episode of the Balkan History Association's webinar series. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have an interesting subject. It's going to be about a travelogue through the Ottoman Balkan Peninsula. So, we have joining us today Dr. Košťálová, and she is at the Charles University in Prague. I will let her introduce herself a little bit more, and she will begin with the presentation. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you for invitation, and I will try to share my presentation now. I hope it will work. Share. Okay. I hope it's visible for you all now, the first slide of my presentation. So once again, thank you for invitation, for this interesting opportunity to have the possibility to present one of my issues. I'm coming from Prague. I'm from Charles University. I work at the Department of Ethnology, Central European and Balkan Studies. And my fields of research are mainly historical anthropology or early modern era sources or ego documents. I will explain them later. And I'm also a translator from Armenian language, from early modern Armenian language, and I work with chronicles and colophons translated from Armenian. But of course, I work also with Czech written sources or Slovak or Polish, etc. And my focus is on 17th, 18th century so-called minor chronicles or local chronicles, not the main narratives. So my today's topic is entitled Václav Vratislav of Mitrovice Travelogue to Ottoman Empire through Balkans and his captive narrative. Sorry, I've got a fault in the inscription. I thought of that. It will happen and it could happen. Travelogues, I perceive them as a sort of ego documents, which are shaped by time and space. And these texts are, of course, spoken from the first person narrative paradigm. And this travelogue or travel accounts come from the very beginning of 17th century, and they are based on Václav Vratislav personal experiences of his journey to Constantinople, of his 2 years stay in the capital of Ottoman Empire, and of his 2 years captivity experience working on Ottoman galleys. So what I try to use is a culture-poetic approach or textual analysis of this source based on the culture-poetic approach because I'm trying to see what happened at the same period and at the same time, at the same geographical and symbolical space, what happens in other sources, what is written, what is conserved in oral traditions, and etc., etc. So to see the mosaic of the period, to have a touch of everyday reality possibly. So I work with culture poetic approach, with culture history approach, and I'm trying to do something which is near to historical anthropology and history of mentalities or anthropology of emotions and mentalities. What we will see in the source is a complex imaginary of otherness, I mean, of the process of making of other within the frame of Orientalism. This theory is based on Edward Said's famous book named Orientalism, but I work also with these versions somehow reconsidered. So the specific Central European form of 17th century of Orient construction and especially boundaries construction. What we will see in the source is of course an omnipresent fear of Turk so Türkenfurcht from German, which is a dominant paradigm of 16th, 17th, sometimes even 18th century minor chronicles written in Central European region. But on the one side, there is a fear and really a perception of the threat and of the ongoing attacks and approaching wars. But on the other side, there is always some level of fascination by other. I will explain it later. So we will see some borders of alterity and making of borders, either geographical, either symbolical. And we will speak about confessional identity and about maintenance of the identity negotiations. Also, the period chosen is quite interesting. 17th century, or the very beginning of 17th century, is from the one point of view, a period of Little Ice Age, or so-called Little Ice Age. And from another point of view, well, there's a period of social rebellions, of revolts, of social economic problems, of epidemics, of even pandemics, and of course of wars, which result in 30 years war, in Smuta period, in Russian Empire, or in so-called Great Flight period in Ottoman Empire. I mean, they are characterized with really poor harvests, cold summers, really cold winters, etc. So there was no food, people became ill, so of course they were really vulnerable to the pandemics, etc. In chronicles, we saw also very frequently mentions about werewolves' appearance. I mean that it's also connected with the period, like the anarchy and chaos, and working with the notion of catastrophe, which is approaching. So this period is really interesting to explore the limits of community resilience, or if you want to, community vulnerability. So here on the left side, on the left photograph, you can see the famous Turk statue from Baroque sculptor Brockov, which is from Charles Bridge in Prague. Of course, it is quite later than Václav Vratislav Travelogue, but on the photograph we can see absolutely all markers of alterity and of Orientalism, so-called Frontier Orientalism. So, I mean, we can see the statue of Turk with tulband and, of course, a sword, a curved sword, which, yes, and this statue, so the Turk, is... he's a guardian of slaves which are in prison, and they possibly waiting to be ransomed from the Ottoman captivity. And on the right side, you can see the classical paper or anti-Turkish, anti-Ottoman paper or pamphlet speaking about approaching war and making really the figure of Turk. I mean, what Ottoman Turk will do if he comes into your village. So kidnap young girls, kill all children, small children, of course, because others were enslaved, killing a man, taking a cattle and burning, plundering everything. So in this kind of sources, we can, of course, see a specific form of Frontier Orientalism. So I worked with a thesis of Austrian historian Andre Gingrich, which reconsiders somehow Edward Said's original version of Oriental construction. I mean, Europe-Orient literary constructions. And he works with a specific form, saying that Central European region and of course Balkans, some part of Balkans, were really on the border. I mean, all time on the border. It's not the Orient construction as in the case of French literary works of the poets and writers in 18th century. It's something completely different, because you have an enemy always present on your border. So you must to develop or to work with a thesis of omnipresent threat, but also with a certain familiarity of your enemy. So there's no great fascination in this construction. There is mostly a fear, but a knowledge or I don't know if I explain it well, a precise knowledge of what will happen. And finally, what happened each summer or each beginning of autumn. I mean, constant raids, constant invasions, taking slaves, etc., etc. So, Frontier Orientalism thesis of Andre Gingrich, and we will touch a little bit also the notion of antemurale Christianitatis myth, which is typical, for example, from Hungarian Kingdom or for Rzeczpospolita, so Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 17th, 18th century. And this mythology is later used and reused and reinterpreted during national revival period by Polish and Lithuanian myth makers or nation makers. And antemurale Christianitatis means that Polish men, I mean knights and soldiers, stand on the very border of Europe, facing not really the fascinating Orient, but the danger from the steppes. I mean, everything which is alien and everything which is anti-civilization, and they just shed their blood because of the defense of the whole Europe, of course, within the frame of Christendom. What we see also will be the images oscillating between cruel, bloodthirsty Turks and Tatars, which is mostly popular version of this literary and folklore image. And on the other side, there is a construction of Grand Seigneur Turc taken from Uzbek Turkish letters. I mean, a sort of noble adversary image when Ottoman Turks are depicted in a very high respect and reputation as really noble knights from other religion, of course, but which are facing Europe in a very balanced battle between knights in a very chivalresque tradition. So we can see that there's fascination and Orient luxury and adventure, what to do in Ottoman Empire, how to face the Ottoman Empire. And on the other side, we will see the fear of raids and scorched earth, etc., etc. So, these slides show us the famous Battle of Mohács at the beginning of 16th century, which is somehow a fundamental myth or fundamental mythicized battle for Central European region and the moment when Ottoman Turkish danger in brackets enters the Central European region and tries to establish, of course, a movable border. I mean that the border is never stable and strict and easy to cross. To start the presentation, I choose some very mysterious images now, just to see what imprint or what trace left the Ottoman Turkish heritage in the Central European region. And I show some masks, I mean not a Shrovetide mask. Here you can see the famous Shrovetide masks, an intangible cultural heritage list of UNESCO. Which are imitations of Janissaries hats, very probably. I mean that the Ottoman perceived danger coming from the border is reflected here in Shrovetide or Carnival masks and figures. The same here, but these masks are from pre-Christmas period, so it's very actual. It's the end of the Advent and Saint Nicolaus horovod during or across villages. So these masks are very probably inspired by, once again, by Janissary hats. And they also have swords. It's not visible here on this photograph, but they have also mustache as once again, Ottoman Turkish element, one of these literary constructed elements which are forming the image. Okay. And I hope it is the last, yes, it is last slide showing the reflection of Ottoman Turkish heritage in today's Czech Republic. It comes from the musical band known as Musica Folklorica, which are remaking old balladic motifs, and they are trying to make short films with these motifs, of course accompanied by folkloric music. And this one is called Kidnapped Bride or Turkish Bride or Abducted by Turk motif, which is really widespread throughout whole Balkan countries. And there is a reflection also in Slovakian folklore or Polish folklore, and of course Moravian part folklore, because Czech Republic, just to explain, is composed from 3 historical regions. So there is Silesia, but the great part of Silesia is now in Poland. So a small part of Silesia, and then there is a Moravian Margraviate and Bohemian Kingdom. And they were together even through Habsburg Empire, or within the frame of Habsburg Empire, they were together as Bohemia, Moravia, and Silesia. And Moravia is just near to the frontiers, or to the borders with actual Austria and Slovakia and Hungary. So Moravian region was also the most influenced by so-called Turkish danger, and there is a reflection and very negative image of Turkish raids on the territory of Moravia, which were quite frequent during 17th century. And local sources speak about Turks and Tatars coming from the border, from the direction of Hungary, today's Hungary, stealing cattle and taking younger girls to become their brides. So there is really a strong reflection of this historical experience. And these ballads are always tragic on the Moravian side, but they have a comic reflection on the Bohemian side. I mean, Bohemia on the western part of Czech Republic was never touched by historical presence of Ottoman Turkish raids or invasions. So this motif became much more comic. I mean that the Turk comes and the bride says, no, I'm not here, but you can leave your gifts here and we will take, yes. So there is a very comic version without murders, without blood or everything. So if you are interested, you can just see Musica Folklorica on YouTube. They have several short films. Here we can see once again the great oscillation of images between singing Turk, noble adversary, sometimes even comic version, as we saw in balladic motifs in Bohemia, and on the other side, the tragic one, I mean, based very probably on the direct historical experience. Here we can just try to compare the great extent of Ottoman Empire in 17th century. So we saw the territory, of course, in Mediterranean, Asia Minor or Near East region, and of course Balkans and the great part of Black Sea region. If we approach more to the borders of actual Czech Republic, and Václav Vratislav came from the territory of actual Czech Republic, we can saw the border of Buda Elayet, so today's Budapest in Hungary. So we can see here Ottoman eyalets of administrative divisions of Ottoman Empire in 17th century. So of course here we can see that the really interconnection of Central European and Balkan region is quite apparent here together with the Black Sea region. Yes, and once again a map which shows quite precisely. If you see on the left side, Vienna, capital of Austria, and we know, of course, that Vienna was 2 times sieged by Ottoman troops for the first time in the 16th century and for the second time in the late 17th century. And these moments are considered to be peaks of Ottoman presence in the Central European region, and also the roots for creating the image of permanent Ottoman danger in these areas. And Prešburg, very close to Vienna, is of course today's Bratislava, I mean the capital of Slovakia. And on the left side, on the Prešburg, you have the last remnants of Carpathian mountains, I mean the most western part of Carpathian chain of mountains. And these regions were quite frequently attacked by Ottoman troops or by their akanji, I mean the, how to say it in English, not really regular troops, but irregular one, yeah, sometimes connected with Hungarian renegades, etc., etc., but just attacking villages from the other side of the land border, I mean left on the left side of the Prešburg. So here you can see that really the border was very close to the today's heart of Europe. Now some information about Václav Vratislav of Mitrovice. So he was a Czech nobleman, and at the end of 16th century he spent 4 years traveling to Constantinople, staying in Constantinople, and then to be in captivity and working on Ottoman galleys for 2 years, and then in 1595 to be ransomed, and he returns back to Bohemia. He was a member of Crackwitz delegation, and yes, here we can see very probably his face. And after his return, he wrote his travelogue together with his captive narrative. Some 200 pages are written in early modern Czech language, which were some 100 years ago translated into English. So we have an English version of his accounts. I will show you just a little bit later. So this travelogue is entitled Adventures of Václav Vratislav of Mitrovice. And at the end of 17th century, it was really famous. The reception was really extended, and he was also nicknamed a Small Turk, Václav Vratislav Small Turk, Tureček in Czech language. I mean, the connoisseur of Ottoman Empire, somebody who knows very well what happened there. So once again, a member of Crackwitz delegation mission, which was sent by Emperor Rodolph II. During the reign of Rudolf, the Roman Emperor, and from the Habsburg dynasty, Central European region, especially Prague, I mean the capital of Bohemian Kingdom, was quite frequently visited by Ottoman embassies and Persian embassies. There were even camels and Arabic horses in the very center of the Prague. So I mean that the inhabitants of Prague were quite used to Orient, in brackets, coming to them. And Rudolf sent 3 delegations to Ottoman Sultan, because you know that later there was a great war, which is called a long war between Habsburgs and Ottomans, and which finally was fatal also for Crackwitz delegation and for Václav Vratislav. So I just returned for a while to see the face of Small Turk, Tureček, and on the right side his book, Adventures of Václav Vratislav of Mitrovice. And here you can see the English translation, which was made by his grandson, if I'm not mistaken, translated into English. Adventures of Baron Wenceslas Wratislaw of Mitrowicz. So if you want to, you can read it in English version. Okay, of course, Václav Vratislav of Mitrovice was not alone to be sent into Ottoman Empire and to write a travelogue speaking about Ottoman realities. There were many others, or several others, also writing in Czech language or in German language and coming from the territory of Bohemian Kingdom or Moravian Margraviate. I put here only two of them, quite famous one. Or in Czech perception, famous one. On the right side, Krištof Harant of Polžice and Bezdružice. On the left side, Heřman Černín of Chudenice. And they both visited Constantinople and Jerusalem. They were pilgrims to Jerusalem. So their knowledge of Ottoman Empire was somehow modulated according to pilgrimage to Jerusalem, the Holy Land visits. Yes, here we can see some Janissary court dress, which was reflected before in carnival masks a little bit. So Janissary is on the right side, typical turbant or turban today's like headgears of Ottoman nobility or Ottoman men. And here we can see some typical marks or vestimentary marks, dress code of Habsburg noblemen. And what is interesting, we will see in Václav Vratislav Travelogue the mention of very quick conversions from Christianity to Islam on the very border, for example, while crossing the Danube. And it was always symbolized by taking off this collier, or I don't know how to explain in English, collar or ruff, yeah, made from embroideries, to taken off it and to throw it on the floor and to put a turban on the head, like a visible sign of conversion from Christianity to Islam. And we will see that these cases were quite frequent. So on this image, we can see the Danube, which is the river with a great R, near Komárno-Esztergom localities. So today, between Slovakia and Hungary, I mean, Komárno is on the Slovak side of the Danube, and Esztergom is on the Hungarian side of the Danube. Border mobility and even porosity. I mean that Václav Vratislav writes that when they approach the Danube, and he was completely amazed because at this time he is 14 years old. He's really young, and it is his first great travel accompanying the other noblemen and members of the mission. So he's completely amazed to see Danube, saying that, oh, so great river, I never saw it. And of course, this great river is a border between his world, I mean Habsburg one, and Ottoman world. So they meet Ottoman troops in the very middle of the Danube on ships. They meet together, they pay some tolls, they show their letters from the emperor, etc. There is a really ceremony how to invite the members of the delegation to Ottoman Empire, how to control them, of course, so showing the passports, etc. And he describes this really in details, and it's interesting to think about how to cross every border finally. I mean that approaching with a fear, approaching with expectations, then really be stressed and nervous because you never have your passports and everything, I mean, without problems. So it is quite the same in the 17th century, yeah, in this travelogue. Of course, the first view is even glorified, yeah, and yeah, and also we can imagine this border as a sort of passage ritual, as described by Arnold van Gennep, initiation ritual. I mean that I need to be purified while leaving the Christian side. Then I'm in the middle, so I'm in liminality. I'm I'm not in the Habsburg Empire, but not even in the Ottoman Empire. So I must show my letters and everything. They control me, and then again I can enter the new world. I mean the Ottoman one. So it's really from anthropological point of view, really interesting description of this experience, one of formative experience during the whole travel. Now the question of conversions. So here we can see a citation from Václav Vratislav. One of ours, a Vlach, it is the word from Italian, yeah, Czech word for Italian members of the delegation. By name Nicolau de Bello, from Crete Island, turned to be a Turk. And he went to Janissaries, drinking with them, making with them acquaintances, etc., etc. And suddenly he announced that he wanted to be Turk. He took his hat, he trampled it. That is the case of throwing away the visible signs of Habsburg dress code, like the collar and the hat. And Janissaries put him on the head the turban, so turban, and introduced him to other Janissaries. Of course, this described conversion was a very probably voluntary conversion, and it was really quick. In several minutes, he just declared himself to be Turk, and the same evening, Václav Vratislav just sees him, this Nicolau de Bello, drinking with Janissaries and wearing the turban. Of course, the indelible part of the conversion was not only the visible sign as a turban and the dress of Janissaries, but also saying 3 times Shahada. I believe in, etc. So he just did it publicly, and this was all. So the conversion was very quick. We can, of course, ask why there were so many Christians described in these kind of sources turning up to be Turks, especially on the border. That they should have some reasons, probably pragmatic one, starting new life on the other side of the border, because probably they can acquire a higher social status. They will have a house in Constantinople. They will have several wives, a nice horse, regular incomes. Everything is possible. No obligations to their original feudal lords or landowners. So that is the great question, why and in what extent these conversions were voluntary or forced. Because, of course, historical sources reflect also forced conversions, which are much more numerous in descriptions. But probably we can ask if these voluntary conversions, how much they were frequent, especially in 17th century, because these really quick conversions also show us the porosity of the religious border or confessional border, because it was just transferable very quickly from one side to another. Another example, a German man from Augsburg, now a Chaush, an official messenger in Ottoman army, who converted to Islam many years ago, told us that Pasha, the main commander, gave him a beautiful horse and 20 aspers a day. And finally, 20 aspers is not so bad, 20 small silver coins to have your house and etc., etc. Another citation, Janissaries, which adopted Nicolau de Bello and the very border, they converted him to Islam. They drove into the gate of Esztergom, right next to our rafts, ships on the Danube. They stopped, they prayed 3 times, and then they fired from their guns. And then they drove between us, shouting in our faces and probably showing their triumph. So be very happy that they converted the member of the delegation to Islam and showing the force of their religion and making it in face of the Christians. That also Václav Vratislav, his travelogue are like full of expressions and full of his feelings. And from the point of view of a historian, it's really interesting to read it. So we can see really blurred borders of confessional identity. And of course, in this kind of document, I mean, a good document, it means with a personal touch. Václav Vratislav wrote as I witnessed, I saw, I feel, I felt. So that is the strict definition of a good document. There are frequent mentions about other dönme cases. Dönme from Turkish, Ottoman Turkish, means somebody who turned from Christian to be Muslim. Dönme, yeah, converted. And they always include own accent on own strict refusal to convert to Islam. I mean that in Václav Vratislav, it's like that throughout his whole text, he just don't want to convert to Islam, and he shows it everywhere, like saying that others did it for many, many reasons, but I never, never, never. Even if I can save my life from galleys or from prison, I will not do it. So, once again, Danube crossing as a gateway to Orient, travelers approached with expectations, perhaps fear, worries, at the same time with enthusiasm, and excitement, which is quite sane as today, I think. And whether they got closer with fear or with curiosity, in any case, it was about emotions. So why history of emotions? Because these sources are the certain answer on our questions from present to past. They had to think about when and how they would return home, if ever. Thus, inseparable part of the border crossing concept encompassed the idea of a return journey. In case of Václav Vratislav, it was complicated because he was in prison and he really believed that he never returned from Jedikule fortress. So, in this slide, we can see his itinerary throughout Balkan countries to Constantinople. I mean, through Budapest, through Bělehrad in Serbia, through Niš and Sofia, and Philippopolis, which is Plovdiv, of course, and through Edirne to Constantinople. Some contemporary paintings of Budapest, and once again a map to see that really the border was close to Central European region. One citation from crossing through Bulgaria. In Sofia, we lived in a very nice inn. Everything was so clear, our rooms as well as balconies. During the whole journey, we didn't see anything comparable to it. The same goes for the road from Sofia. We never saw so nice cities and villages full of people, beautiful and fertile fields, etc. I cannot omit the mention concerning the extreme beauty of Bulgarian girls, says Václav Vratislav. Nice costumes of white color, full of embroideries, earrings and bracelets and necklaces and chains. They are dressed like Bulgarian queens. So, contemporary image of Constantinople, or the visualized approach to the city from late 17th century. Constantinople and Marmara Sea, Bosphorus. And now the citation about another conversion case in Václav Vratislav. Trickster, Hofmeister. Hofmeister was a sort of majordomus, I mean the main keeper of the kitchen, etc., who accompanied the diplomatic embassy, which was formed especially by noblemen sent by Rodolph II. Trickster Hofmeister left the house secretly, declaring that he wanted to be a Muslim, to become a Turk. Çavuş was very pleased. They went together to Pasha. They gave him immediately nice Turkish clothes in red color. I mean, once again, Janissary dress, Muslim turban, and nice Turkish horse. Pasha ordered to accompany Hofmeister to the circumcision. Many hundreds of cavalrymen and infantry soldiers marched before him and behind him, shouting loud around. He cheerfully looked up to our window, showing out his new horse. After circumcision, they ordered him to be paid every day by 40 aspers, and they married him, even if in Prague he was already married, having a son. So once again, this citation shows us the great competition, I mean, between Christianity and Islam in that period, like really to be satisfied that there's another man who converted. And of course, in the case of conversions, there are many Dönme converted from the other side. There are, of course, Muslims converted to Christianity, especially in case of, once again, original slaves working on galleys or Venetian galleys, so they turn up to be Christians. Václav Vratislav also tells the story of young lovers, followers of Greek Orthodox religion. The woman converted to Islam because the probably forced marriage with an older man, Ottoman Czausz, but they maintained their relationship with their former lover even after her marriage. And of course, it was revealed. So they were punished. And she accepted to convert. She accepted. She publicly declared that she is a Muslim. And if her lover declared it too, they could be both freed, according to Václav Vratislav. But her lover says, no, I will never become a Muslim. So they were both killed and executed in front, of course, of the public. Yeah. And it's Václav Vratislav eye testimony that he was present. So, in his text, and sorry, I think I've got more than 35 minutes now, so I will try to quick, or just say me if there's a time any left to continue. Just very quickly, in his text, there are really strict division between Edward Said's categories between Orient and Europe. Even, of course, these categories are pre-modern, so the beginning of the 17th century. But what dominates the description of Constantinople in Václav Vratislav text is, of course, hammams, thermal bath, the cleanliness of these hammams, the description of female parts of the houses, haramlik, the praise of their piety and religious zeal, always accompanied by a nostalgic mention, oh, we Christians, we are not able to do our worship so regular as Muslims are. So finally, throughout the whole text, we can see the distinction between and comparisons between Christianity and Islam. There is also a praise of caravanserai complexes like hospitals and hammams and inns together. The care of homeless animals is really on the top in Václav Vratislav, that like Turks are very, very fine people. They just give food to cats and to birds in Constantinople and to dogs living in streets, etc. There is also a focus on war training of young men and doing exercises near Bosphorus, etc., etc. Once again, accompanied with a nostalgic mention of Václav Vratislav that our young men in Bohemian Kingdom waste their time, unfortunately not by exercises or their military trainings, but drinking alcohol in the inns, etc. So he compares, in fact, all the time his home with his partially new home, if I can say it like that. The praise of the bath in Serbia and in Thrace, very nice and clean. They should be kept clean. If not, there will be a severe punishment and paying a fine. I saw with my own eyes in Constantinople how a bath attendant from the royal hammam was caught and punished. 200 blows on the back, 300 blows on the heels, and 300 blows on the stomach, so that he looked like a pigeon and he couldn't be recognized as a human being. Once again, the focus on bath is really the principal one of principal ones, not only in Václav Vratislav, but also in other travelogues from that period. Another, maybe the last citation, because Václav Vratislav was very young when he entered Constantinople. He was some 15 years old. He made many acquaintances with the same age boys from the Ottoman side. And he knew also very good vernacular form of Ottoman Turkish. So he was able to speak with them, and finally he became a translator for the whole embassy. I mean that his knowledge of the Ottoman reality is somehow completely different from, the so-called high culture text from diplomatic milieu written by adult and really in sophisticated form and written by adult diplomats working on the court. It was quite different. So I just put here the citation about the beauty and wondering about the beauty of Ottoman women, which is quite amazing because it was just an how to say, a young boy was wondering what happens if young girls from Ottoman side just unveil their covered faces, and he was really amazed that they are like at home, like our girls at home. It's quite the same, which is once again completely different to constructed Oriental image in Edward's side, like the really romanticized beauty, idealized behind the wheel. We cannot see, so we are fascinating by the mystery behind the wheel. Yeah, so finally, Václav Vratislav was not so fascinating because he saw everything, and his personal touch with the everyday life reality is completely different than in other texts because he made acquaintances. He was somehow a part of everyday reality of that time. And finally comes the moment when he is sold on the slave market, because he spent 2 years in a really diplomatic palace in the center of Constantinople, so in a very privileged position. But then the whole delegation was in suspicion that they were Habsburg spies. Because the approaching war between Habsburgs and Ottomans are really the basis of these suspicions, and finally, they are in one day, there is an Ottoman police control, and they are all put in prison as Habsburg spies, and they are sold on so-called Esser markets, so slave markets, in the very center of Constantinople. And we know that this practice was quite frequent, and finally the captive narratives or slavery is connected with Ottoman Empire, especially in the 17th century. I just put a mark that 100,000 slaves, according to historical sources, was sold in the markets of Kaffa, Crimean Peninsula. So they were probably taken from today's Ukraine, probably part of Moldavia or northern Romania, in 10 years of the beginning of 17th century. So just imagine what number from other places, from Western Caucasus, from the rest of Balkans, etc., etc. So there were really enormous amount of people which were enslaved, and of course the majority was never ransomed. Some of them were ransomed. So here we can see a painting which depicts the Ottoman slavery. And here we can see Václav Vratislav prison, Jedikule. So he was enslaved, he was put in 7 towers, and then he was sold to work on Ottoman galleys. His travelogue is really interesting in this part because he's really thinking about how we can escape. So it is quite close to Monte Cristo narrative, I would say, because there's a really story about secret letters and giving bribes to Ottoman guards and smuggled knives and smuggled everything. And then finally, some of them tried to escape disguised as Janissaries. Yeah, but not from Václav Vratislav group. He knows other cases, he describes them, which is interesting to compare, but he himself with his friends just stays in the prison. So we know that escaped were controlled about their dress, about their circumcision also, and of course about their knowledge of vernacular Ottoman language. And probably you know the famous Samuel Korecki case, who escaped once from Yedikula. He was famous throughout the whole Europe, and they arrested him. Ottomans arrested him for the second time, and for the second time he died in prison. So here we can see 17th century remakes of Ottoman galleys, where Václav Vratislav spent 2 years. To relieve our pain, to soften our misery, sometimes we got wine from Greek islands and Wallachian cheese from Montania, which was also interesting mention for me. And finally, in 1595, he, with his surviving friends from the mission delegation, diplomatic, they were ransomed through captivity, through Galata merchants. So probably there was a connection between Bohemian clergy or Bohemian noblemen. They just paid for him some 200 golden coins, which is extremely great amount, paid for a young boy from, of course, noble family, but not a rich one. Yeah, so just imagine that, for example, the official entrance to Jerusalem, Holy Sepulchre, was 8 golden coins, if I'm not mistaken. So 200 coins for a man's life, it's not too much. Yes, and his relief from the captivity is connected, of course, with the end of the war, Habsburg and Ottoman War, which ends after 13 years of fighting by Zitvatorok Treaty in 1606, which codifies Ottoman border at, once again, Esztergom and Komárno border. And at the end of 17th century, they are able also to conquer some parts of southern Slovakia, but it's not the discussion for today. The last slide, which shows us the reception of Václav Vratislav Travelogue, because in the Czech tradition, he is really famous as a story of a young man who survived 2 years as a slave on galleys, who returned at home, who finally made a fortune and who became a really important nobleman, backed by Habsburg policy on the Catholic side, even during 30 Years' War. And there is one citation from unpublished memoirs of Vlasta Kálalová-Diloty, which is a woman with very interesting life. He was the first Czechoslovak female doctor specialized in chirurgical operations, and she wanted to go to Baghdad to open a really hospital for women, only for women in contemporary British part of today's Iraq. And she left memoirs which she wanted to publish, but they were never published. And when she crosses Constantinople, she is in a constant reminiscence of Václav Vratislav Travelogue. So during her promenades, she writes that we are now at the shore of the bay, etc., and galleys landed here, and that is the place where Ottoman Turks brought Václav Vratislav from the execution site to exhausted by illness, half dead, into a cattle ship, etc. So also these reminiscences to his life were quite frequent even in 19th century, even in 20th century. So that is from my part probably everything I wanted to say today, very briefly. And in his last slide, you just see a sort of conclusion. why I think that the study of these sources is so important. Because it's a somehow reflection of polyphonic history of the whole Europe, and not only the Europe, I mean polyphonic history of the whole world, and the multiplicity of historical voices coming from the past, which should be heard in the present. And of course, an important contribution to the knowledge of Orient, framed by Frontier Orientalism theory and a typical ego document of 17th century with built images. So thank you a lot, and maybe I will wait for your questions now. So I stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Košťálová. I apologize for coming in late. I was having major technical difficulties, but I was very glad to hear your talk. This was wonderful and incredibly informative. So, as the moderator, even though I did not fulfill my duties at the beginning, I wanted to open this up and see if anyone has any questions. You can voice them out, or you can put them into the chat, and I'd be glad to read them. Anyone have any questions? Well, while everyone is thinking of questions that they could potentially ask, I do have one myself. So, Václav wrote his memoirs, all of the texts, from what I understand, 30 years after the fact.
Yes.
So to what extent can we take the details he provided at face value after that much time?
After that much time. That is the question. And once again, I think we can compare it with our own lives. Finally, for example, you or me, while traveling, we have a certain experience, immediate experience on the place, which is, of course, completely biased and distorted, but it is our perception. And then we take a travel note. So probably he, at this time when he was a young boy, during these 2 years, he took some travel notes while staying in Constantinople, like making mentions what day we did what. It's quite usual in these kind of sources. And of course, when he was enslaved, it was just nothing. He couldn't write nothing. But probably he had some notes helping him to evoke later in the memory when he was already an adult man in Bohemian Kingdom, helping him to imagine these situations he was a witness, I suppose. Because, for example, I worked on other travelogue from the same period, but the travelogue was written by Armenian scribe from Lvov in Ukraine, and he was a pilgrim to Jerusalem and to Rome and to Cairo, Egypt, etc., etc. And he did really detailed travel notes because he traveled 10 years. And after these 10 years, he just wrote a travelogue. So I suppose based on the notes he did during his stay.
This is absolutely true. They probably jogged his memory. And honestly, I think might have given time to ruminate his experiences to add those details that in the moment you know everything in and you don't know what to make of it. And then with time, you're able to reflect on what you encountered, what you experienced. So it might have actually enriched the material that we have today.
Sorry, I just couldn't hear you properly. So I don't know if it was a question. I have some problem with the connection. But if you
Me
ask...
too.
There's nothing to repeat.
Sorry, sorry.
Yes,
Yes,
no, my connection is terrible, which is
yeah.
the problem I've been
Because we are
having.
far away.
No, I was just saying that there's a good chance that he had the 30-year gap actually gave
Don't
him an
think about it.
opportunity to
Mhm.
reflect.
Yes, yes.
and be able to revisit these experiences and enrich the text that
Yes,
we
of course.
receive.
And probably some idealizations once again. Finally, you never know because there are so many levels in the historical texts. It's like so many things you must to think of that we cannot say finally. Yeah, that in what
You're right.
extent he just imagined or he remembered or he was really based on his travel notes. It's really
Are there other sources that corroborate his experiences, other sources that state parallel
yes.
experiences?
And they are not so numerous, but they are. For example, Krištof Harant of Polčice a Bezdružice, I mentioned him at the beginning of the presentation. He was there some 2 years after Václav Vratislav of Mitrovice. And he left another kind of travelogue, so the very end of 16th century, yeah. And he left a really extended travelogue of something like that. But as he was really a man of science, it's not really a travelogue. It's maybe more the summarizing his general knowledge about Jerusalem as holy places. As finally, you have, while reading Krištof Harant, you have impression that he moves into two words. Another, or the first one, is just imagined. I mean, the holy city, we follow the path of Jesus Christ. And he continues. And then he adds, but now it's an Ottoman city. You have really impression to move in two words. But Václav Vratislav was not so, I would say, man of sciences. He just, I don't know how to explain in English, but he's very close to the folk people, like explaining them in a very popular way. It's not the case of so-called high literature travelogues, because they cite from Bible, they cite from Ovidius, they cite from Aristotle just to show their knowledge, which Václav Vratislav do not. You know? He doesn't do it.
Right. Okay. I can see that. I understand what you're trying to say. He was closer to the people. He um, was communicating in the vernacular. Absolutely.
Yes.
Timothy, you're raising your hand. Hi.
Uh-huh.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, that was fascinating. I really appreciate this presentation, Dr. Košťálová, and I'm going to buy that book today, The Adventures of Václav
Oh,
Vratislav. I'm going to purchase it after we finish this call. But you mentioned that the Turks, Ottoman Turks, suspected him of being a spy. Was he actually doing any work in an official capacity for the Habsburg court, or was it just an adventure?
He was too young. When he was in Constantinople at the beginning, he has maybe 14, he was 14 years old, so 16 years old when he was put into jails. So, and when he returns, he continues to do some diplomatic position, but not a higher one. I mean, as the I don't know how to explain. The head of the delegation when he was in Constantinople was a nobleman named Krekvitz. And Krekvitz died in the prison when they were all put in jail in Seven Castles Tower, yeah, in the Jedikule. So he died there. And sorry, I just didn't understand if you asked about the basis of the suspicion, if they were really spies or not, or if
Yes,
he
that was the question.
Yes.
Yes, if they
That
really
was the
were
question.
spying.
Yes. We just don't know. We don't know. Possibly yes, but I mean that it was in the atmosphere of the fear of the approaching conflict. So logically, it's a very fragile position of each diplomat to be on a hot soil, if I would like say to, I can say like that, to be on the hot soil of Constantinople, very close to Sultan. So, Václav Vratislav in his book speaks about some secret letters or materials, which should be hidden. But if you remember the story of Hofmeister, who converted to Islam, he just betrayed them, saying where these secret letters are hidden. And now the question, what was written in these secret letters? We just didn't know, yeah? It could be openly doing a spy for the Habsburg side. But it could not. It could be just diplomatic notes. What happened in Ottoman side? I mean, that you can never say, yeah? It seems they have had something to be hidden.
Thank you. And we have another hand up for Mihai. Mihai Dragna? Did you have a comment or question?
Could you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Super. My question is more likely a curiosity. For example, I heard the mention in this travelogue about the Wallachian cheese from Montaigne, and I'm
Yes,
curious
yes.
in
I
which
put it
context
because
was
of
this.
you.
Yes,
This
this is
mention.
very important. So I'm curious in which context he mentioned this, how he interfered, because his travels was south of Danube. So I cannot imagine how he
knew about Wallachian cheese. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
because
Yes,
this,
I've
this very
understood.
problematic
Uh-huh.
confusion in terminology, Latin, Slavic, and so on, between the Vlachs, the
It
actually
should be a
Romanians, and the
terminology.
Wallachians, you know.
Mhm.
Yes, yes, because both of them, they
It
are cultural, both of them, they make cheese and so on,
Uh-huh.
and they
Thank
sell.
you for the question. He narrates the story about Wallachian cheese while he is describing his really hard days in the slavery on galleys, that they are all the time ill, they are hungry, etc., etc., etc. And then he says something we have to drink red wine from Greek islands and something Wallachian cheese. And I wondered how he could know about the appellation. It seems to be some terminus technicus, because probably taken from Greek interlocutors, because between other enslaved galley slaves, there were many, many Greeks. And on the other side, there were many local Greeks who just help them and who bring them food. So I think he must, or he should, to take the name from these Greeks, local Greeks, who just say, "Oh, we bring you some bread and Wallachian cheese," I suppose.
Yes,
And then he described the structure of the cheese, and he says also that they were other slaves from German countries, which were completely not used to eat the cheese or this kind of cheese, especially not in the soup. Because when they are hungry, they are making a soup from the cheese, like putting sorry for I'm mixing with French words, putting a part of the cheese into the soup, and like because probably it was better for people who are always hungry to eat it within the soup. And he says these Germans just looked at us like, "Oh, what are you eating? Terrible cheese." And then 10 days after that, they were so completely hungry that they ate it, and nothing rests. So yes, it's interesting. I think they took the name from Greeks.
yes, for me it's also interesting, but I'm more curious about because you mentioned Muntenia, which is in Wallachia. So how do you think he get
How
in
he knew
contact?
it?
Yeah, about
Yeah.
because the Vlachs also made the cheese. So if we are talking about the Greek, we should say more about the Vlachs, not the Wallachians. I mean, north of the
Uh-huh.
Danube, because he didn't
In
travel
Czech
north of the
original
Danube.
version, it's written Wallachian cheese coming from Montania. And
So it's really written like this.
yeah. And I don't know finally how he could knew these details, or
Because historically speaking, what was produced in cheese industry. So first of all, in the 17th century, we already had a higher production than the previous centuries. So north of the Danube, most of the cheese goes to East Central Europe, not in the south, because in the south there were already the Vlachs who made it, and they already had the networks. We know about cheese in Constantinople, even in the 12th
But
century,
probably
on
it
the
was
Mount
a sort
Athos
of,
and so on. Yeah.
maybe
So
it was just a cheese which was called Velekin by local
yeah,
Greeks.
yeah, it's very probably also. Or maybe confusion because as you probably know better, in Polish also, not only in Czech. In Czech, it's even more clear, but in Polish, it's very hard to distinguish, especially semantically speaking, but in relation to
Yes.
history, even early modern, between the Vlachs and Wallachians, So
Yeah, we have the
it's very
same
complicated.
distinction in Czech language.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. It's very interesting, and it's maybe one of the earliest which I know. I mean, I have to remember if there are other earliest mentions about opposite side, like cheese, Wallachian cheese, which comes to the south. But what island was this? I cannot see. You mentioned he was talking about a Greek island, but which one?
Even the island is mentioned,
Okay,
but
I
I
understand.
don't know the name. But it was the
Yeah.
island, like the island of the red wine, not really of the cheese. Yeah.
Okay, it's something
But
like
it should be,
yeah,
Jedikule. I try to imagine the situation because Jedikule is like on the shores of the Bosporus, so which is the closest, as islands are circled Ada, Büyük Ada, the islands
okay.
of
So
Prince's
Buyukada or
Island.
some Princess Islands or something. I
Yeah,
understand.
and they were
Yeah.
inhabited mostly by Greeks, only by Greeks, and by some Armenians. So probably
Yeah.
he speaks about this island.
Yeah, because in this area, especially in Constantinople, uh,
Yes.
Vlachs, they used to sell cheese and milk products since many, many centuries before. So yeah, now I have more ideas about this, but it's very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mihai, for that very insightful comment there. I caught it during the talk, but this was an interesting side quest here about the cheese that was something to consider. How did they know it, and where did it come from? Thank
Yes,
you.
yes. And finally, when you read it for the fifth time, there are so much questions arising, much more than at the first glimpse, I would say.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, all right. Are there any other questions from anybody in the audience? All right. So far, not so much. But thank you so much, Dr. Košťálová, for this wonderful talk. And this will be posted, from what I understand, on YouTube. So we'll be able to revisit this in the future. And I'm sure if future questions arise, they'll be posted in comments that you can also revisit.
Thank you a lot for invitation.
Of course. And thank you, Mihai Dragna, for putting this together on behalf of the Balkan History Association.